of a second here, as the internet is filled with wonderful possibilities and technology and stuff. Stuff's a good word, isn't it?
Lots of stuff.
All of the stuff. I remember back in the day when the government said the internet was a series of tubes. Isn't that do you remember that?
Wow. Yeah. They never
Yeah.
quite understood what it was.
I still think they don't. Years
No.
later, I am so I feel like we're not gonna get too much into politics tonight because I don't think either of us really care to. But one of the things I've just noticed as I've gotten older, it seems like government has gotten dumber.
I think if you look now, there are a lot of people of every age very active on
Oh yeah.
on the internet, so it's not necessarily linked to age. But I think there are a lot of people, particularly guys in higher office, who have always had a secretary to print off their emails for them. They
Mm.
never bothered to learn to type. They never bothered to learn email. They had people for that. And I think they are not out there personally hands on, even with their own families, probably for security reasons, using all these tools, and they just don't get it.
I wish it was that. I would love to believe you. I would love to, but I live in Canada. Our politicians are younger
Hmm.
and are just about as clueless. So I can only conclude one of two things: they're sharing the same drugs and not sharing with us, so we too can understand. Or two, they're reading the same script. Or three, they're right three, and this is and maybe I don't know. I'm not making a conclusion here. Just something I've just noticed. Or three, what I've noticed is maybe just maybe something about government just basically forces people to kind of conform to this like mystical little box that is government, and so, thus it makes everybody dumb. And I think the system, since I think the system's eroding, I think it's more apparent the flaws are there. That's it.
Yeah, in my past life, when I worked in corporate America before I started writing full time, I worked with a lot of CEOs and C suite executives. And these were
Yeah.
smart people with MBAs from the top schools and lots of experience. And it was amazing how little they knew about how the actual world worked because they had
Yep.
people for that. They had administrative assistants who handled their mail and handled everything on the computers, and they had spouses who handled the rest of the real world. And all they had to do was show up and live in it. And that's a nice gig if you can get it. But I think it's kind of like when you see these politicians that go into the grocery store and like they've never seen a bar scanner before, or they have
It's
no idea
true.
what it costs. It's because they have people for that. They don't do this themselves. And those of us who do this for ourselves because we are the people, I think we get a lot more hands-on knowledge of these things.
Well, there's something to be said about that. I think this is what I think. Like I've interviewed some CEOs. Like obviously there are authors who are really successful that usually have some kind of corporate title somewhere. And I can usually tell who they are within a matter of a couple of minutes of when I interview them. There's a certain, how do I put this? It's not that this, again, they're great people, but there's a certain way they carry themselves. There's a certain cadence. Once you see it enough times, you're like, okay, I know exactly where you are, who you are, what you do, what you're used to, right? And it depends. There are exceptions to this rule. There are some exceptions to this rule as well, but you can tell. You can usually tell, like if the person you're interviewing lives in a bubble. You can usually figure that out within a couple minutes if you're paying attention.
Well, I've been out for 20 years, so hopefully my bubble has eroded.
Oh well. You seem to be working with Jim Nettles a lot, so I mean, I imagine in some ways the bubble's gotten bigger and smaller at the same time, right?
It all depends
Okay.
on the bubble you're talking about.
Yeah, well, we all live in. I think the one thing I've learned too is that we all live in a bubble in some
Mhm.
form or fashion, and we have to be honest about it. I am young enough to realize I still haven't gotten to the curmudgeonly age of this is what I know. This is the box that I know works, and I'm going to stick there. I'm not that old yet, but I'm young. I'm young enough to realize that I don't know everything, and I'm still young enough that I can change
Mhm.
easier, right? No,
Well, as long as you never forget that you don't know everything, changing doesn't have to be hard. it's when you think you've caught up on knowing everything and you get a little too comfortable and you forget that nothing stays the same. And so you have to constantly change. I mean, evolution, change or die. You know.
Well, no. So I would say this. I think the comfort's the key, because there's two levels to that. The first level is just the time you've been on the planet. Like, look, you and I have things that work well for us, and we know what those things are. Now, there may come a day where that doesn't work anymore, and that's very hard. When up until, let's say, I'm not going to ask how old you are. I don't know you well enough yet, and you might just beat me. But I say it, all right? How old are you? No. So then suddenly the podcast ends, and then they come back, and it's just your podcast now, because you just like, and we just that, and I'm going to entertain you for the rest of the hour.
There will come a day, but it is not this day.
Yeah, exactly. So I say it like that because, like, the thing is, I think the longer you're on the planet, the longer you do things that work for you, the harder it is to break those habits when and should they change. Because you said the world always changes. And so something I recognize when I deal with people who are in their 60s, their 70s, like my parents and my grandparents, the world worked for them this way for a very long time. Doesn't necessarily mean that the world works that way anymore entirely. But it's, again, change is a constant. But our ability, our comfort levels evolve as we go.
But if you think that when you're a kid, all the way up until you get out of college or high school, it's change every year. You're in a different class with a whole new bunch of people. You have a different teacher. You might have a different school. And then it's out to a job, or you go to college, and then it's a job. And there's a whole lot of change bundled in those first 25 years. Absolutely. And then for a lot of people, you kind of find a place and you start to kind of coast. You get a job, you stay around for a few years, you get married, so you're not constantly changing partners. You start, that's the whole settling down thing. But before then, you're used to constant chaos. And I think that when you are used to constant chaos, dealing with it is just part of, well, of course I have a new teacher this year. Of course I have all new classmates. Mm-hmm. When you get out of practice with that, it's like any other skill. You know, those of us who have lived someplace for 10 years and then moved, it's like, oh crap, I forgot how to do this. You know, I used to know how to do it. Forgotten
10 years. I wish in my case.
So you're still in the chaos phase.
Well, no, but I'm 41, still in chaos phase. I think I'm always going to be a little bit like next year. Like this podcast is turning 1,000. When I get to like 1,001. I'm going to be on the road with the show. The next step for me is to take the show up early. Yeah, because the way I look at it is I have 10 rules to success. The 8th rule, these are things that I have figured out that worked. The 8th rule is stay uncomfortable.
That's a good rule. Right. I mean, if you think about it, everything in our world right now is changing constantly and fast. And for previous generations, I mean, pre-World War II, the world didn't change very much at all for people. They got electricity, they got phones, they got indoor plumbing, depending on where they lived. But and before that, the world didn't change sometimes in a generation. And now, I mean, my grandparents went from horse and buggy to man on the moon.
Yeah.
And now it changes hugely in so many ways all the time. And I think that's fried a lot of people. I think a lot of people are just very uncomfortable with that and very fried with that, and that explains a lot. You know, when people are uncomfortable, they behave badly.
So man, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to push back slightly on you. I think the 30s is a lot like now, pre-World War II. The
20s were a lot like now, because they came out of World War I with, you know, that was just hugely depressing, and they also came out of a pandemic. And before the stock market crash, I think there was this feeling of, well, if that's all there is, let's keep on dancing. I mean, we're all just going to die. Let's have a good party before it happens. And then the crash. And then the 30s, everybody was just, oh my God, we've had this crash. We're going to have a war in Europe. We've got the Depression, unless you were really, really lucky.
Well, no. See, I think it's more like the 30s, and here's why
Okay.
I think it's more like the
Okay.
30s. Because this is also a lot of people tend to forget. Like if we're talking about terms of technological change and advancement, there was a ton of things going on in the 30s, even
Sure.
more so than in the 20s. The 20s was yeah, like, and if you're talking like in the moment, we're coming out of the pandemic's over, the post pandemic, the COVID's still there, but again, if you look at the World Health Organization statistics, you're more likely to fall down at this point than die from it at this particular point. That's just where it is. So we're past the everybody's going to die phase. We're now in the we are adjusting and living with it going forward, depending on how it goes. We'll see how it goes the next couple of years on a couple of things, but generally speaking, that's where we're at. So in that sense, we are like the 20s. But I think I think since the internet has become a public consumption use, right? We have been closer to the 30s, where we're in the sense that we have new and wonderful ways of doing things available at our fingertips in ways we never imagined. Henry Ford with the automobile age. You have Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was playing with some really cool stuff in the 30s that until World War II changed his perspective, right? We have Royal Reimer with some of the stuff he was doing. We have some of the stuff like we have Edison. We had Einstein. We had a plethora of brilliant people playing with all kinds, even ideas that are still considered novel today. They were playing with back then. What's interesting to me about this particular time and place is I think there is a road we could take that could lead to another world war. There is a road that I can see it. At the same time, there's also the possibility of another kind of renaissance. And the 30s had that same parallel too. So that's for me. Again, one of my big, if I ever get to the point I do an opus, I wanted to do a story about the direction of like how technology influenced stuff. So the big points in modern history are the Civil War, right? That was the rise of the industrial age, the 30s, and now.
Well, and I think you're right on the 30s with technology. I think as far as cultural change goes, I think the 20s were on that, because you had the cultural clash of prohibition. You had women cutting their hair and wearing short skirts, and in some cases, getting the vote. And you had a lot of people casting off social mores because of the war. And so I think you've got different types of upheaval. You've got the technological upheaval that leaves people behind and costs them their jobs and upends how their world works. And then you've got the social upheaval, the cultural upheaval that upends everything their mama told them. And now they feel very uncomfortable because they don't have a map.
Which is why I became self-employed in 2020, because I realized that I think the future is decentralization. That's where I think the future is. My only question is how we get there. I think there's a myriad of paths we could take, right? I hope we don't pick the most difficult one, although there is a little part of me in the back of my head that thinks that's probably how we're going to do it, right? But
species, we do have a track record for making stupid choices.
Yeah, like my question is, do we skip the whole Tower of Babel phase, or do we not? And that's really the only question I have. I hope we do, because that's going to be painful if we go through that phase. But that might be the way we do it. I don't know. I could literally for me projecting into the future, I can literally see, right, just based on something you're talking. How about we compromise? How about we can acknowledge that there are elements of history in various decades that we can see going on at the same time? Are we willing? Are we good with that?
Absolutely. And see, the fun part as a writer is I've got series that kind of play with most of those scenarios.
I know you do.
So I've gotten to game them out, and I like some better than others to live in, but they all make good stories.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is the cool thing about right now is we are in an excellent story. Now we got shitty times ahead because I mean, everybody wants to admit this or not, we're going into a recession, or we are in a recession, depending on your point of view.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I definitely see a path of after the next couple of years where things will get better again. I can see it. Right.
That's
So
the thing with most stories is they make good reading, but you really don't want to be the protagonist. And
no, but
you don't want to be the chosen one.
Oh, well, chosen. Well, no. See, we know this. I know this even in like modern times. The worst thing you want to be listed at in our history is a hero.
Mm-hmm.
It's because usually that means you've gone through the ringer, right? And
usually they sing songs about you after you're dead.
Yeah. But I don't want that. See, I want to sing songs about me when I'm alive. I can enjoy those songs, right? Right. I see. I don't mind going through struggle to get to somewhere. I'm good with that. I don't need people shitting on me through the process. I don't like life's hard enough, right? I have found that anything that's labeled a hero usually gets shit on by its very people eventually. It's almost like you're a hero. No, don't say that. Don't say that. I'm going to pay for that. If you say that too loud and everybody starts spreading it, I'm going to get it. Like I'm going to like that. That's how this works. That has always been how it seems to work. So I don't know. So chosen run, far away from that, right? Look, I understand Jonah. Jonah is like, you go to the end of it. It's like, no, I don't want to. No, you can't make me. I'm going the other way because he knew. Right? It's like,
I mean, yeah, you don't want to be the hero. You don't want to be the chosen one. But for a story, it makes a damn good story.
Oh, absolutely. So let's see. Where did I first saw your books in a bookstore in London, Ontario, called City Lights. That's when I first saw you. Used bookstore. Mm-hmm. I don't mind. Like when I was getting into science fiction and fantasy back in my day. Shut up, clouds. I have this. I was looking at people, and somewhere I say early 2010s. I saw your books, and it's like cool. Like you're doing. Hello. Okay,
yeah,
cool. No. Just there's a moment where I was like, oh shit. I hope it did. Like again, technology, wonderful thing. But no, I saw your books and I saw you for a while, and then I didn't see you for a while. So like I saw you it was Solaris, I think it was. It was your publisher. Right. So I saw that. I saw your Necromancer series, and I thought that looked pretty cool. I think I got them still in my storage locker somewhere, crossing my fingers. I still don't know entirely what I have in my storage locker at this point. I've been unloading, and as I'm getting ready for this venture, I'm like, I want to get rid of my stuff in a way I want to get rid of my stuff. That'd be nice. So I'm like, what do I keep? What don't I keep? I don't know if I still have your stuff or not. I'm thinking maybe not. But yeah. So you did corporate life for a long time, and then you said you said fuck that. I'm going write full time. So what was your jailbreak like? I'm assuming it was a jailbreak.
Well, kind of. The Summoner came out in 2007, and I've had new releases every year since then with various publishers. So Solaris was bought by Rebellion in 2009, but it was up for sale, and nobody knew what was going to happen. And I had a book that was coming out, that needed to come out. So we jumped to Orbit, which is a division of Hachette. And what are really the last two books of the Chronicles series, Chronicles the Necromancer series, got picked up by Orbit as the Fallen King cycle. And that's really books 5 and 6. And then they wanted me to do a completely different series. So I did the Ascendant Kingdom saga, which is post-apocalyptic medieval. Magic goes feral, that kind of thing. Main guy, the only guy who can fix it, got sent to an Arctic prison colony. You know how it goes. So I did 4 books in that series for them. Then Solaris wanted me back, but they couldn't have me back on epic fantasy yet because of contracts. And so they got me back for the Deadly Curiosities series, urban fantasy. Did a couple of books in that series for them, as well as a steampunk book co-authored with my husband, Larry Martin, Iron and Blood. And then they were able to get me back for epic fantasy, and we did the first book in the Darkhurst series. At which point, it kind of quit being fun working with big publishers, and I wanted more freedom than they wanted to give, and we parted ways. So I've still got backlist with Orbit, and we are doing 3 brand new series, ongoing series with Falstaff books. But I did part ways with Solaris, and we actually just got rights reverted on those, and we're in the process of bringing those out. The Chronicle series is going to come out in hardcover. I don't have a date for it yet. It's never been in hardcover. Everybody always wanted it in hardcover. We're now going to bring it out in hardcover. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, because I'm a hardcover snob. I'm not going to lie. So in traditional publishing, the one thing I really love about young adult books over, say, like adult books, they know how to freaking do a hardcover.
They do. They also are much savvier, I think, about marketing.
No, they are.
Way adult book stuff. They just want to throw it against the wall and see if it sticks. They don't really want to put a lot of effort into marketing it. Doesn't stick on the first try. Oh, well, so sorry. There's somebody else in the queue. Where the young adult books seem to do put a lot more effort into the marketing. At least that's what it seems like from the outside.
No, it's because, again, I like me a good hardcover, but I also like, it's ironic. Like I think science fiction and fantasy, right, are really like that. I remember, again, back in my day with the clouds and all that stuff. But I remember when I started, I had a tendency to love the hardcovers of like the big Robert Jordan stuff back in the day, and like at the time that was the pinnacle of what you could do with a hardcover. Well, flash forward, like just we'll say about in the early 2000s. Young adult was really taking their swings at it, and it was and I love how innovative YA could be. And then I had like an epiphany when I did a science fiction meeting I'm in Calgary right now, just to let you know where I'm at for the moment. Who knows, right? Who knows what I'll be a year from now? I could be on a beach somewhere. That's actually
pretty country out there.
Yeah. What? Pardon?
Pretty country out there.
Oh no, it is. I lived in prettier country 6 months ago. I was in Canmore, Alberta, which is literally in the mountains, right? Oh, I gotta tell you, when you live in like by mountains like that and you wake up to them every day, you miss them when you leave. You really,
it's beautiful up there. I've been up to Calgary. I've been to Banff. It's gorgeous territory.
Yeah, so Banff, like Canmore's literally right. Yeah, Calgary's pretty. Don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna say Calgary isn't pretty, but when you're actually in Banff, it's like that. You know what I mean? It's like it's like. Yeah. So I say it like that because just where I'm at right now. But we were doing like there's a writers community here with science fiction, and I realized something. I had this really sad epiphany about science fiction in particular, but even fantasy to some degree. They have fallen the pinnacle of thinking about the future, right? At least in traditional, seems to be the farthest behind in terms of presenting their products. And it actually made me sad when I had this realization. It was like, you have some of the coolest stuff. You should be thinking in the future. Why are you stuck in the past?
It varies by person, but I have seen that as well. And I don't have an answer for it.
Yeah. I don't know either. I was trying to figure this out. It was like, you're the future. Like, you should be the bold ones doing the crazy shit. Like, you should have a QRT novel / like a QRT code with some kind of weird like pamphlet instruction game. Something like that should be what science fiction should be doing. Because I don't know. I'm giving away my future plans. That's neither here nor there. But that's neither here nor there. What I'm saying though is like there's so much possibility in publishing today. Whether you're an independent, and again, I can't knock all the big publishers because again, you look at YA, you look at some of the genres. Yeah. They're very if they're not ahead of the curve, they're very on pace with the curve at the very least, right? So it's not everybody. It's just it seems like I said, it's one of those. I think maybe it's the decentralization effect I mentioned earlier with publishing. The fact that maybe if you are a science fiction fantasy author, you might be better in some cases on your own, right? Or maybe it's just a simple fact that they don't want to put the effort in, and as a result, it has created a big void in the market.
Well, I think a couple of things are at work here. I think that folks who came up through the publishing industry and made their fortune in it at a certain time didn't have to do a lot of those things for themselves. Because they couldn't. A lot of the effective things had to be done at a top level because we didn't have social media. We didn't have some of the tools that we had easily available now. And they got used to being taken care of because they had people for that. And then the publishers have cut and cut and cut, except for their top, their stars still get people for that. Everybody else coming up doesn't get people for that. And the people who have staff for that never really needed to learn. Why should they do it now? I think that that's where, if you came up after that period, or your exposure to having people to do that for you was more brief, then you got thrown into the pool sooner. And I think some people are more receptive to learning how to use social media, how to do marketing. My MBA was in marketing. I always knew I wanted to write books. I wanted to make sure I could market them effectively. I actually did my MBA years before I ever got published, so that someday when I wrote books, I would know how to market them. It's helped a lot.
No, it would. It legitimately would.
Yeah, it helped a lot, not only in tasks and skills, but also in a mindset of there's nothing dirty, bad, wrong about marketing. It doesn't make you less creative. It doesn't make you less of it doesn't take the shine off being an author, because you also try to sell books, because, it does pay the rent. And I think people get hung up on that, I need to take a step back from that. Or some people do.
I know it's a headspace thing, because okay, so my first exposure to marketing, you're going to laugh when I say this, pro wrestling. It's the epitome of self-marketing. You go back into like the early 80s, especially the early 80s wrestlers talking to the radio. That's pure marketing. And it's one of the reasons why, again, Macho Man Randy Savage is my favorite wrestler of all time, because he was really good at that shit, right?
Want to see great grassroots marketing? Look at NASCAR.
Yeah, NASCAR's great at that too. Like, NASCAR's fantastic at it. To a lesser, prior to UFC's Reebok deal, some of the fighters that were in UFC were really good at it too. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them. But going beyond that, like, what I realized, what marketing really is, it's really just two things. It's human relationships and storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
That's all marketing is. Right? Marketing is, okay, you have a book that's awesome and made of cheese. How do I get this said cheese to an audience? Who will like this cheese? That's the research aspect of marketing, first and foremost. The second thing is, once I know who's going to like it, how do I appeal to them? Right? Now, sometimes, this isn't necessarily a book thing. I'm not necessarily using fear so much in book marketing. I don't know if you can intimidate somebody. You must read this book or else. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I'm not sure that's necessarily the best way to do it.
I think I've done a lot of nonfiction. Read this book, have a financial crisis. Read this book or you'll never lose weight. I think that happens in nonfiction. I don't really know how you would scare someone into reading a fiction book. You might scare someone into a fiction book. Not scare them into buying it.
You get someone that looks really intimidating and goes, you buy his book or he will take your lunch money. I mean, that might work. That might work on something.
Tells them once, after they run away from you, they're never going to buy the sequel.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, like I said, for fiction, I'm not quite sure that's the way to do it. But even so, the same thing. Like, you find you figure out who likes your stuff, or who might like your stuff at the very least. And then it's like, how do I talk them into giving it a try? Because the thing about a book, too, the other thing about a book is, the biggest thing a book has going against it is it requires an investment of time to get into it. That's the thing. And if you have that investment of time, people will go with you the whole way, right? And that's a very important part of the deal. Some people catch on to that very quickly. Some people don't. But once you realize that, it's like, so the real challenge is, how do I get them to turn to page one? Because if I can get them on page one, I can take them on the ride. And that's
you're not trying to convince non-readers to be readers.
Yes.
That's somebody else. You're trying to convince readers to read your book in the time that they have available to read any book. And so you don't have to sell them on reading. But you do have to say, look, I understand that you only get X number of hours free to read a week, and you probably have a huge TBR pile. How can I convince you to put my book on top of the TBR pile? or just add all of my books to your TBR pile and get to them when you get to them. I don't care when you read them. I just want you to put them in your TBR pile so they're there when you get around to them. And I think that's, that's kind of a challenge. But we don't have to convince them to read. Our audience are people who already like to read.
Yes. No, but I'm just saying, like, to find your book in particular, that's like, that's the interesting part, right? So, and something again, because the cool thing about today being the way it is there's a niche for everybody. I do an Alice in Wonderland Greek mythology mashup. You know who I think is going to like my stuff? Theater kids. Why? Because it's Alice in Wonderland and it's fun. I'm having blasts. I had Alice play croquet in the underworld against Jason of the Argonauts. I can definitely make it fun, right? So
Sir Lewis Carroll was doing some, while he was writing that. So you're probably not far off.
No, not that, not really. Like, again, if it's Alice, you can be whimsical in a very fun way. That's the cool thing about Alice in Wonderland, right? So, but that's the thing, right? You find that audience, and suddenly, right? And suddenly now you have people engaged in what you're doing, right? And that's the whole of the secret when you get right down to it. Again, it sounds simple. I am simplifying this a little bit. The research can be. I am doing as a marketing project right now. I'm trying to build an audience for a brand new collectible card game. Now there are some big challenges with that, but one of the things I'm doing for the next few months is the research. Who do I think is going to want to play this game? How can I make it as appealing to them as possible? And that is my primary job for the next 3 months.
Well, and the other piece that really goes with marketing is once you've found the people who like your books, how can you stay in community with them? How can you stay in contact with them? How can you continue to be interesting and relevant to them? How do you keep them communicating with you so that they know when you have the next book coming out, so that they know when you have the next series and they're intrigued by it? Because, nobody ever wants series to end, and some series can be open-ended, but others have a definite arc. And so how do you get people who read your first series to give your second series a try?
Yeah.
And that is you've got two different big pieces with marketing. One is the lead generation. That's the meeting the new people, bringing them in, giving them samples, getting them hooked. Then the second is the continuing relationship with your existing readers. And that's a different set of skills. That's your newsletters. That's a lot of your social media. That's the in-person conversations at conventions. Some of that is exposure to new people, but a lot of it is keeping the connection warm to the folks who have already found you.
Dare I say the two magic words, customer service?
Well, it's interesting because I don't pack the boxes at Amazon. So I don't have anything to do with whether you get your book on time after you order it or if it comes damaged. Customer service in an author-reader relationship is a little different. It's, to me, it's have a good ongoing conversation with people. Don't piss people off unnecessarily. Sometimes you got to take a stand, but most of the time, try to be a decent human being. Wheaton's law, don't be a dick. Treat people well. And try to be kind of interesting, and if you can, slightly humorous if it works for you. I mean, that's sort of the customer service because it's not transactional, like giving somebody.
No, I don't want to make this very clear. I don't necessarily refer to the transactional part of the deal. It's not that. No one cares about that. To be perfectly honest with you, no one cares, right? I look at the fact that I look at the fact that if someone is willing to meet with me, talk, especially in today's day and age, we're having a social media. Me and you are just suing the shit for an hour, right? Right. So someone listening to this, we'll find out this is what makes Gail Z marketing interesting, engaging, fascinating. And if somebody really likes you, they might go follow you on Twitter or might check out a book of yours or something, whatever else you offer, right? The service today, I think a lot of authors realize is interaction. We don't live in an age anymore where there's this, even look, unless you're Stephen King or or J.K. Rowling or someone that has such a huge following and that like they literally can't do it anymore, right? Unless you're there. The reality of the situation is we don't live in like your bubble has to be allowed to engage
Mm-hmm.
with people because people are ultimately like people are are who read your stories,
Mm-hmm.
right now depending on where on your platform. Like for example, let's say I decided to do a Kickstarter. Well, now I'm looking at it a little differently. I'm still looking at the interactive process of it, but now I'm looking at the fact that Kickstarter, right, are collectors.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I make that experience feel worth it to a collector, right? What
Mm-hmm.
can I do to make that special, different? And again, these are just things I'm thinking about. Like that's that market. Like an indie, they may not care about collections so much, but they want a good story and they want access, at least in
Mm-hmm.
some form or fashion. That's the key. Like again, we don't like the people that are the most engaging, the most themselves. And I should say that. I think that's the biggest key. The most themselves, I think, are the people that tend to find their audiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that you're absolutely right. The days when you could be a recluse and still write best-selling books are long gone.
Mm-hmm.
The connection is part of the currency, and people expect to be able to find you. They expect to be able to reach you on a personal level. And that's what social media has built as an expectation, and that's what it facilitates. And some people are truly more comfortable living in that space than others.
Yes.
There are people who are truly shy and introverted, and that's just hell for them, is having to interact with people. Doesn't mean they don't care about their books or their readers. That's just not how they're wired, and that's really a lot harder for them to do. Some of us who are a little more extroverted, it's like, hey, let's have a conversation, and it comes easier.
I think what it is to me, it's not even. I find this with introverted people, really introverted people. It's not that they don't want to talk necessarily. They have to find something they're interested in talking about, right? So that's what I have found. Like if you can find that interest spot, hello, you will have that they may be the loudest people in the room. I've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like right because they're passionate about it. So if you are an introvert and you're listening to this, what are you passionate about, right? Because if you can find like people respond to passion, right? They you're going to say something there, so I'm just going to let you.
Yeah, I think it passion is absolutely part of it. But I know authors now. I'm one of the I'm the founder and one of the con runners for Continual, which is the online ongoing multi-genre convention that never ends. We do Zoom panels. We do about 7 Zoom panels a week. We've done over 500 panels in 3 years with over 400 authors worldwide. I know a lot of terrific authors who have said, look, panels are just not my thing. I get anxious. I get throwing up sick just thinking about it. It's just not my thing. They really are that anxious. Now they're passionate about their books, and I've seen them in person at events where they know they've got their gang around them and they sparkle.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of being on a Zoom call for some folks in front of who knows whom out there forever on the internet, just makes them freeze and throw up.
Yeah.
I expect that, you know.
Oh yeah, totally.
That's hard because not a lot of our tools that work the best right now favor a certain psychological profile to make the most of them and disadvantage some psychological profiles or personality types.
Oh no, I agree with that. The only thing I will say to that is things will change. Like the honest truth is, me personally, I love personal interaction at this point in time because I'm on this bloody thing so much that someone goes, it's easier. Are we in the same city? Well, yes. Then we're hanging out in person, or I'm not even going to bother with you because I'm like, and that's where I'm at because I'm here. I'm with you. I'll take any excuse not to be on the screen at least some of the time, right? Because I'm on it all the time, right? I want that unique thing, right? I say it like that just to say this: like there are other ways to interact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beyond it. So yeah, everything goes through a stage of it's in vogue, and then it disappears for a while, then goes in vogue again, and then disappears for a while, right? There's a cycle with this stuff too. So and this goes something I said at the beginning. If it works for you, right, then do it, and don't worry about what you don't need to worry about what is cool. Trust me, I don't. It works just fine for me. That'd be just who I am, right? I think that's true with everybody to some extent. There are some people that will never want to come on a show like this because it's one-on-one. It's very intimate in the sense that we just talk about whatever we're going to talk about, right? So I remember one guest to go, "What are we going to talk about?" "Oh, we'll just figure it out as we go." And she had just like her jaw just hit the floor. It's like, hey, what the hell did I sign up for, right? But the idea is it's casual. It's something where we can have a conversation that doesn't hurt anybody's feelings too much, I hope, right? Even if we do disagree sometimes, right? And that's fine. Like that's the thing is it's open for that. But that's not for everybody. But maybe that panel is for that person. Or maybe they do like they film a course, right? Again, a course where people can teach and they can interact with them via email or via event. There's a lot of different ways to interact with an audience. So it's sometimes it's just about making the effort to find what that is for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, and I think we all gravitate toward those things that suit us best, and so you may have to still do some of the things that aren't your favorite type of connection just because they're necessary. But and you can get good enough at them. You don't have to be proficient at everything, but you're going to find your sweet spot, and that's the thing that you enjoy doing. And because you enjoy doing it, you're also good at it, and that's where you're going to make the most impact.
Exactly. Like that's the whole. It's not about doing what's in at the moment. Like again, Zoom. I know there's this. I mean, even now, although there are advantages. We're having a conversation via the internet, like through StreamYard. It could have been Zoom, although on a personal note, Zoom and Twitch do not like each other. They tend to engage in some kind of weird Mortal Kombat. I can do it. I just don't want to do it because Zoom and Twitch hate each other. I don't know the full relationship there, but there's just a little bit of like pure hatred there. But that said, we can like the idea of like the Zoom calls. I mean, I can see it. Like there's a bit of a fatigue with it with a lot of people. We do it because it is convenient in some ways. Work wise, I mean, I don't necessarily. I am wearing pants, but I don't necessarily have to wear pants, right? Right. And there are days where that's all you want to do, but then there are days where it's like, you know what? I just don't want to be in this room all day long, right? There is a desire for change and right and a desire there. So I think, like I said, all these things have their moments. Like Zoom was very necessary in 2020. It's not as necessary in 2022. There's a place for it, and there always will be, and there's always going to be a need. Again, I'll still do shows digitally especially if they're by design to be digital only. I will probably still be very open to that possibility. But if I can be in front of people making an ass of myself, I'm very good at it, Gail, I assure you. Right? I will do that, and I will enjoy that experience that much more. It'll be much more fun for me to do a panel. It's much more fun for me just to talk to people. Because especially I think after the last couple of years, I mean, I still think to some degree it's still going to be the case for another couple of years. I think a lot of us are still kind of starved for that contact. So again, that's going to be the case probably for another 2 years, and then in 2 years I might be like, oh fuck, I just want to go back fishing on my boat again because I'm a human being and I can't make up my goddamn mind. But that's right. But it varies, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think it also holds true for other types of social media. You don't have to, if you're on TikTok, you don't have, or Instagram, you don't have to be on it at the level where you're an influencer. That's not what you're trying to do. You just want to be out there having some fun so the people who look for you out there or who stumble across you out there can follow the breadcrumbs home to other places where they can find out more about you. You don't have to, have a Kardashian following out there. You just need to be out there having a good time, doing some stuff that attracts people when they stumble onto your videos. And then they go looking for more, and maybe they find you on the platform where you are more at home and doing something that feels more comfortable. And I think a lot of people hold back from doing different platforms because it's like, oh, I will never get 1 million followers, so I shouldn't even try. And that's if you got invited to a room that had 1,000 people in it, you would feel like you were really reaching a good crowd. Well, get 500, get 1,000 people on, a social media platform following you, and they may not see every post, but that's 1,000 people in a room, and those are people who can hear what you put out there. If they go, especially if they like you and they go looking for it.
I again, looking at this from my perspective, I have 3,500 followers on Twitter. I have a big mouth. That's a testament to my big mouth right there. I have 3,000 on Facebook, 1,300 on LinkedIn, of all places. Now, again, they're not huge numbers, but they're my audience. Mm-hmm. And really, that's all that matters. And it's about how I treat them and how they treat me. And what I realize is, it's about me being me. I don't need the biggest audience. I just need my audience. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's it. Again, it's not. Also, I wouldn't want Kim Kardashian's audience. I honestly, I wouldn't. Not just the specific name, but the numbers. Because you know what those numbers mean? I can't take a shit in peace. Yeah. All right. I can't. There are points of. Cool thing about being a writer is there are points of fame you're very likely not going to hit. Now, some still do, right? This is one thing I do not envy about Stephen King. Yes, he's got the followers, but that boy can't take a shit in peace anywhere. He goes anywhere.
Yeah, John Hartness says that there's famous and then there's writer famous. Writer famous is when you can walk into a convention and people go, "Hey, how you doing?" and they recognize you. Famous is when you walk into a Starbucks anywhere in the world and people know who you are. Exactly. Very few writers achieve famous in that Starbucks level. A lot of people, at least at their regional or local conventions, hit the writer famous.
Yes. And writer famous is fine. Writer famous is fun. The other one's not so fun. It has one advantage, just one. You can make a shit ton of money with it, but it's not.
Maybe. And some people do, and some people don't do so well.
It depends on what your goal is. If your goal is just to become famous, mm-hmm. I look at if you're trying to become famous, I'd ask why. If you're trying to become successful and you happen to become famous as a result of it, well, that happens, right. That's sometimes it comes part and parcel with whatever happens, right. You look at someone like Mark Hamill, for example, like Luke Skywalker, mm-hmm. right. That dude's famous for the rest of his life. He knows it. There's nothing he can do about it. He's always going to have a little bit of that role in him, right? Now, there are some advantages to it. He doesn't have to do another acting gig ever, right? But at the same time, I mean, so now he gets to have fun, which mm-hmm. is actually a great spot to be in career-wise, right? Mm-hmm. What's fun for me? But, I mean, at that same time, I don't envy that guy going across the street. I just don't. It's like, I saw Carrie Fisher at a convention here. She was surrounded by security. And mm-hmm. She was still alive. She was surrounded by security. You saw her dog. You knew it was her because she was surrounded by security. And then she was surrounded by people following her. And it was like, I don't envy you one bit.
Well, fortunately, that doesn't happen to very many writers.
Yeah, fortunately, Stephen King, it does. But I mean, right? But so it's like one of those things. Like, yeah, writer famous is a wonderful space to be in. In your group, you might even be cool. I don't know if I'll ever be cool in my group. I might just be silly. I'm good with mm-hmm. that. Like I look at, well, the other thing I realized too, after everything I've been through in my career so far, again, it's weird for me saying my career so far, I do my best work when I'm having fun.
I think everybody does. I think the
Yeah,
more you enjoy what you're doing, the better work you'll do. And if you absolutely hate what you're doing, you're not very likely to do a good job at it either. And life's short, so
yeah,
I,
exactly. I remember, so my very first signing, and this was probably the most important marketing lesson I've ever learned. I did everything wrong. I mean, seriously, I flaked out on advertising. I did all the stupid shit you're not supposed to do. But I did one thing right, and this is the thing I did right. So in the store I was at doing my very first ever autograph signing, it was in this really bad. What made it worse was it was a really bad location. You couldn't see it visibly on the street. So what I did was I took arrows, printed out arrows, and I taped them to the street. And I know, and it was really cool to watch people follow it right to the building.
mm-hmm.
I learned the most valuable lesson I've ever learned in terms of sales, marketing, right there and then. If you make it fun, people will play along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. And otherwise known as gamification. I mean,
Yeah,
how can you get people to do what you want them to do? You make it fun and you make it a game, and everybody wants novelty.
yeah. Well, again, if I tell you, hey, you want to buy my book? You'll be like, I don't know. I don't know you very well. You got a big ass mouth. I've talked to you for nearly an hour now. I don't know. But if I go to you, do you want to play a game? Back of your head's like, what kind of game? I'm not interested. You're like, okay, I'm curious. What are you going to offer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And depending on my answer is, you'd be like, okay, I'll play along. I'll play because again, it's one of the most. It's again, I've learned it. Gamification is important because one of the big thing that a game can do that a book cannot is the interaction, right? The player actually influences the result, and that's something that's something that I think that adds a huge layer to both marketing and storytelling too. If a player can impact where the story goes, or a person can impact where the story goes, suddenly it's like, I got power, and this is so cool. I made this happen. I
Mm-hmm.
never underestimate the power of what achievement can do to the person you're interacting with.
Yeah. And there is a great deal of that in that we create the story we're reading in our heads. So
Mm-hmm.
when you watch a TV show or a movie or a video game, you're entering someone else's vision of what those characters look like, what the location looks like. All the descriptors have been created by somebody else. When you're reading a book, you bring that book to life in your own head, your own way. And so the way I see my characters may be very different from the way other readers see my characters. I've had this discussion with a number of folks who have said, oh, I always thought of him looking like this. And it's like, well, you're not wrong. He looks like that in your head, and that's fine. In my head, he was a little taller, but, or whatever. But I think that is the interaction that readers love about a book versus a movie or other types of media, is that they are in charge in terms of how they create the world in their head, how they see it, who they fantasy cast as the characters, um, and their reality of reading that book is going to be different than everybody else's reality of reading that book. No two people are going to read a book and have the same vision in their head, no matter how carefully the writer tries to describe it. And that makes that book completely unique to you. So while I get what you're saying about people liking the choose your own ending kind of thing with video games or having a multiple choice of branches, I think there is an aspect of that in reading, and it's baked into the core because it's how you see the story as it plays out in your head.
So I guess I'm going to ask it like this then, going down that path. So when you release the book into the world, do you still see it as yours?
Yes and no. I
Yeah.
mean, it's mine in terms of I'm the one writing it. I'm the one who is driving this story. Now, I totally get that you may experience things in the book that never crossed my mind, because each person brings their life experience and their baggage and their triggers to a book. And something that doesn't bother me at all may really remind somebody of a childhood trauma and upset them. I can't know that. There are 8 billion people in the world. We all have different, and everybody has their own life experience. If you read the reviews on your books, which I do, sometimes you look at it and you go, I have no idea where you got that, but okay. Certainly wasn't in my mind when I wrote it, but you saw it there. It went with something in your background. You really see how much people view your writing through the lens of their own experience. And there's no way to predict that. You can try to be as descriptive as you want. People are going to see what they see because of their own baggage, their own experience, their own lens. And so in that sense, the book is very dynamic because it's different for each person who picks it up.
Mm-hmm. Like in going into this a little bit better, it's actually fun to play with those expectations a little bit too. It's all in what you show and what you don't show too. Because again, no matter what, even in real life, no matter how we look at the world in person, we have a tendency to use our imagination to fill in the details we don't have. We just do. It's just how we're built. So it's always, no matter how descriptive you get with a book, or no matter how descriptive you get, you'll never be able to fully get. Also, even if you did, let's say somehow you found you magically sealed it off, it wouldn't be as fun. Like it just wouldn't. It wouldn't be at that point. People would be like, well, I guess, right? I got this and I got this too, and it'd be like, and then people would be sad. It's like, because you got to have that little wiggle room where people can put some of their own pieces together, and that's always the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But anywho, I think, Miss Gail, we have pretty much an interview here. What do you think?
I think we do too. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no, thank you so much for coming. I like it. I'm always amazed people say yes. It's like, I know it sounds like a really serious. I know that sounds. It never gets old to me that again, you've been in the business a long time, right? And you've had a very, very significant amount of success, right? So, and kudos to you, by the way. It's awesome, right? But at the same time, it's like, well, like there are people. I saw someone today like, oh my god, I got this celebrity's phone number today, right? What do I do with it? It's like, well, I want to get them on the show. What do I do? Just says worst case scenario. They say no, right? Or again, I just asked. But every time I don't take for granted when I get the yes.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense, because it's like, oh, cool, they want to talk. Okay, I better bring my A game. It's like, and then you'll be like, what are we talking about? Yeah, we'll just make it up as we go. And it doesn't matter who I talk to, and it's always interesting to see what comes to the surface. But you didn't quite answer my first. And this is the last one we'll talk about, and then we'll get you to plug whatever is going on with you right this minute. You never told me. What was this? I asked you, like, you jailbroke into. I jokingly said you jailbroke into writing. You kind of skirted that. We went down a different path.
Yeah.
So I'm just very curious. I'm very curious.
Well,
when did you make?
I'd always been working on the books, all the way through. I always joke that it took me 20 years to write The Summoner, and since then I've gotten faster. But it really did, and that was because. I'd get busy, I'd get a new job, I got married, I had 3 kids, life kept getting in the way. And every time it would be quiet, I'd pull it out and work on some more. And then it would get busy and I'd put it back. And I was comfortable in corporate, had a good job, paid well, good benefits, decent hours. It was not the kind of thing your mama raised you to quit.
Uh-huh.
And then they had we hit an industry downturn, and they had a series of layoffs. It hit my division, and I looked at it and said, you know what? I started doing some marketing consulting. I started doing some freelance writing. I started doing some things like that to bring money in. But I said, this is really a sign. If I'm going to get this book out there, I'm going to do it now. Because I'm going to get an agent, get a publisher, get the book finished up. fish or cut bait. And so that gave me the time, even with doing, freelance consulting, freelance writing, some of that stuff. And then as the books picked up and did well, I could let that freelance stuff go. It served a purpose, but it wasn't my passion, and focus completely on the books, which have always been my passion. So I sent the boss who laid me off a thank you card every year for Christmas until he finally moved and I lost his address. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for laying me off. It's allowed me to do what I always wanted to do in the first place. But it's very hard to do the irresponsible thing as an adult, especially when you have a mortgage and you have kids and you have expenses and you have a partner. It's really hard to go, hey, you know what, honey, I'm just going to chuck the job that I got a master's degree in to do and the money that came with it, and I'm just going to sit home, take a wild flyer on this other thing. That's really hard to do. But when you get the boot print on your butt, you go, I'm going to reevaluate my life choices. And that's kind of how it worked.
Okay, so it's a cool story. I'm going to ask it like this, and then I promise we'll get to the part. But it's an interesting question in my head, and something I always ask people, because there's, again, your story is not in one sense isn't uncommon, since there's a lot of people that get comfortable and do their thing, and then one day they realize, well, oh shit, I better do this now. Was it when you? How do I put this? I understand you have kids to feed, you have a home to pay, and you have responsibilities, and that's very real. Like, it's a very real thing. Mm-hmm. But at some point, I had this conversation with a buddy of mine. He's a musician and a comic book writer. Because I have kids, and I had to really think about it. But at the same time, he goes, I asked him this. I'll ask you this: isn't there, in some cases, right? At the end of the day, you still got to do things for you. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that like that is, your kids are going to come into the world and do whatever it is they are going to choose to do. I'm sure. I don't know how you are exactly at this point. Again, I don't know if I know you well enough. But assuming they're taking on the world right now, one of the things I think that is a kind of like a responsible is you got to deal with your priorities. There's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, too, life's about more than priorities. Sometimes you've got to go for the things like you kind of feel on the inside you're doing. So. If you had done it earlier, would it have been that irresponsible in hindsight?
Well, that's one of those, you have no idea.
Yeah.
How butterfly effect. You change one thing, everything else changes. You have no idea how it will play out. I have a lot of friends who jumped into the pool, the high risk pool of, I'm going to be a writer, and they jumped into it in their 20s. And they rode out the hard times, and they, lived on mac and cheese for a long time, and they kind of dug their way out of the hole and succeeded. And some people got tired of digging and gave up.
Yep.
I got the life I wanted along the way. And maybe the cautionary tale is that I had an older cousin who didn't make some of the same choices for balance. And if you put all your eggs in one basket and the basket breaks, you're not left with much.
Yep.
And I didn't want to go the starving in a garret route. I found nothing romantic about that as an artist. And so I enjoyed most of the work I did in corporate. It was still writing. And I'll argue that marketing is still fiction. So, I think some of the best fiction I ever wrote were annual reports. But,
no. I don't disagree with you, actually. I don't. But that's another conversation.
But I got the stability out of it to really be able to put the effort into getting the book ready. We were at a point where it was still risky for me not to go back, but we were at a point where we could make that happen. And then when my husband left corporate at the end of 2010, we looked at it and said, he didn't want to go back. And we had always talked about working together full time in the books, maybe not exactly that year, but we looked at it and said, well, if not now, when? We can make this work. Yeah. And so we have worked full time together in bringing the books to life since the end of 2010. There's never a good time, but you can look at it and go, can I make this work? Am I going to, am I going to starve to death? Am I going to be, can I maintain what I need to keep myself alive and reasonably comfortable? Eating on a regular basis, having a roof over your head, that kind of thing. You get used to it. And if you can, then, if you can live with the uncertainty, and that's another big thing, because there's always uncertainty when you aren't getting a regular paycheck. Now, there is uncertainty when you got a paycheck. You just pretend there isn't. Well, but yeah, it was the right time for us.
Well, no, like I think the last point, that's something that I think it's one of the hardest lessons you have as a freelancer. When you start seeing money, you almost get to, like I made this mistake the first time. It was like, I'm comfortable. I'm gonna be okay. And then I realized your contracts go out, and sometimes you don't pick up things right away. You just don't. It's just how it goes. I just went through I just went through that phase. Now, next few months, I'm good. But it's only for the next few months. I gotta look at what's next now, so that if and or when things go patoof, right? Mm-hmm. I'm on to the next thing. And and the other things I'm doing is I'm coming up with a business plan for the podcast post episode 1000, because I want to make money doing it. And guess what? I gotta really think about that, right? So, mm-hmm. To your point, yeah. I mean, to do it on your own, you have to be okay with it being uncomfortable, like if nothing's stable. And the other thing too is you gotta have the faith in yourself to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anyway. Absolutely.
But anyways, I think, again, now we do, I think, fully have a wonderfully, fully formed interview and stuff. So, Miss Gail, what do you want to promote?
Well, let's see. We've got a couple of books coming up. Not quite sure on a pub date because they're coming out from Falstaff, but we do have Spell, Salt, and Steel Season 2 coming very shortly. That is the Mark Wojcik Snarky Monster Hunter in the Wilds of Pennsylvania series. And that is hopefully coming sometime here at the end of October, early November. We also have another installment in the Joe Mack Adventures. That's the Roaring Twenties Monster Hunter, also from Falstaff. And that hopefully is going to be coming in November. We are in the editing phase for Charon, which is the second book in the Night Vigil series. That's the sequel to Sons of Darkness. And so all of that stuff should be coming out here sometime in late October, sometime through November. And there'll be more behind that in the pipeline. So it's just, we're really having a lot of fun.
I could tell. I could definitely tell. So if people want to find your stuff, where would they go?
Well, all the books are on Amazon. They're also on Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Chapters Indigo, Waterstones, pretty much everywhere books are sold. You can find them at least online, and you can order them to your local bookstore if you prefer, but everything's on Amazon. Ebook, almost everything's an audiobook. And if it's not in print, it's the few Solaris titles that just got reverted, and it will be back in print. Me, you can find at gailzmartin.com. And all the social media is some variation of that. If you remember the Z, you'll be fine. There are a bunch of other Gail Martins out there. They're not me.
Like that?
Mm-hmm.
Trained professional right here. They even gave me an award for this. So anyways, that all said, Gail, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, but before I disappear, if I do the crazy ice cream booze cross country podcast thingy, would you like to come back and eat ice cream on the show and just and BS some more?
Sure. I'm
Done.
always up for ice cream.
Yeah. Ice cream and Bailey's. It's fantastic.
Ooh, sounds great.
It does. All right, folks. For everybody watching, everybody listening, this is Gail Z. Martin. She is awesome. Definitely, her books are definitely fun and incredible.
Thank you.
I can speak for myself with the ones I have read in a storage locker somewhere right now. I had a master plan to go break into the movie industry in Vancouver right at the end of 2019, and then March 2020 happened, and the AO went way right. But anyway, for those people who want to advertise their work with the brand, the product, that stuff, I do video, audio, words, and pictures. You can definitely check out my website for more information right now. It's right there, and that will do it. Now, this Friday, I'm supposed to do another drink and draw. I'm not quite sure who everybody is going to be on the drink and draw, but I made this arrangement back in September, so hopefully it's going to be fun. I know some of the ideas. It'll be a pleasant surprise for whomever and whatever. But for everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Stay inspired. Keep shining in the dark. And I'll see you guys Friday.